I love a good monthly recap video. Over on TikTok, I post a monthly yes, no, maybe where I quickly give you an idea of whether I like the book or not. As I read each book, I also post my reviews of them on TikTok and Instagram. You can kind of see them live, if you will, throughout the month, but I do love these videos because it kind of compiles everything together and also gives me time to sit with my thoughts on each book to really understand whether I really enjoyed it or not. So if you want a quick recap version, the yes, no, maybe videos are awesome, and I'll always post those as shorts on here. But if you want to kind of get a deeper dive into what these books were about and how I felt about them, then you're in the right place. So today we are talking about my January recap. I read 7 books in January, which is so impressive because I started the month off in the biggest reading slump. So I was nervous I was not going to get through a lot, and somehow I made it work because of one book that got me out of it. So we're going to talk all about that. Also, throughout this video, I will be having my star rating somewhere on the screen as I talk about the book. And then I thought it would also be really fun to share how I chose the book, because a lot of the books I read are through TBR jar prompts, which I'll also be sharing as shorts moving forward on here. But if you follow us over on Instagram and or TikTok, you will see all of those videos already on there. I personally love TBR jar prompts because it kind of guides me to my next book, but doesn't force me to read a specific book. So it's been really fun. I've been doing it for like the last year. So as I go through these books here, I'll call out how I chose this book to read. So the first book I read in January was The Magic of Belgrade. This actually was chosen in conjunction with another book, which was my second read of the month, The Wilderness, and we'll get to this a little bit later. The prompt that I got for these two books was a book that starts with the word the. I was gonna be gone for vacation for like the first 2 weeks of January, so I wanted to bring a couple books with me, so I decided to choose these two books for the prompt since they both started with the word the. The reason why I also specifically chose this book was because I was in Belgrade, Serbia for those 2 weeks, and so I wanted to really read this while I was there to really immerse myself in the culture, in the city, as I got to read this. I personally loved this book. It basically is like a love story to Belgrade. They're basically kind of like short stories. They don't go more than like 10 pages each, and it kind of just highlights different parts and aspects of Belgrade and as Serbia as a whole. Like I said, I loved this. I gave this 5 stars. I felt very connected to this book, but it's because I am from Serbia and I did read it while I was in Belgrade. If you watch my yes, no, maybe, I said maybe for this one just because if you've never been to Belgrade or Serbia in general, if you don't understand the culture or the people or anything about it, this might not make sense to you because it's really about the details of the city and the country. So for me, it was amazing because I was able to see the city come alive through the words in this book. But for someone who's never been before, it just might not make sense. Like you won't be able to relate to it. So it's definitely a maybe, but 5 stars for me and an absolutely yes for me personally and for anyone else who's been to Belgrade. The next book that I brought with me on vacation, which also was under the same prompt, was The Wilderness. This is the book that got me into my reading slump, unfortunately. And what sucks is I was so excited to read this book. The premise of the book and the way the synopsis describes the book is exactly what I wanted to read about. Essentially, this book follows a group of female friends from the early 2000s to the late 2020s. And it basically is supposed to highlight how relationships change and friendship dynamics will never be the same depending on what time of life you're in. So I was really excited to read this because I'm in my early 30s and I thought it'd be interesting to see how that can shift throughout 2 decades, almost 3 decades of their friendship. Unfortunately, that's not really what the book was about at all. It honestly didn't even feel like a book about friendships. It felt very separated. We would learn about all the different characters, but they didn't really tie in too much. Of course, there were certain parts of the book where the friends were together for certain things, but it just wasn't enough to feel like this book was about friendship to me personally. There were characters in here that I really did enjoy, and everyone had their own different storyline. So I loved January's storyline, which I'm not going to share what it's about because I feel like that would spoil it. And I also liked the first character that we meet, and her name was Desiree. See, like, I don't even remember the characters' names in here because I just did not connect to this book. I really liked Desiree, and she has a sister in this book where they have like a falling out. And honestly, certain characters in this book I liked to the point where I would be willing to read a book specifically on their story. But the fact that this was kind of advertised as a book about friendship and I didn't really get that, this just didn't hit with me. But I would be open to reading about the different characters in their own story. So unfortunately for me, this was a no, and I gave it 2 stars. And it put me in the biggest reading slump of my life. I really had no desire to pick this up. I was forcing myself to get through it, and I had no desire to even pick up any other books for some reason. I'm not much of a DNFer. I've only DNF'd a few books in my life, so I knew I wanted to get through it, and I was hopeful that it would get better. So I still still read the entire thing, and because of that, I just had no desire to read any other book. Thankfully though, I do go to Silent Book Club. So if you haven't heard of Silent Book Club, check it out. It's literally across the world. There are different chapters everywhere. So chances are there's one near you. But I go to the one in New York, in Queens, and one of the girls who hosts that Silent Book Club chapter told me that a great book to get you out of your reading slump is The Correspondent. So literally leaving Silent Book Club that day, I went straight to the bookstore and I picked up The Correspondent because The Wilderness just was not doing it for me, and I needed to look forward to something that was highly recommended to me. So I was able to pick that up, and that was my next read. So this was not with any TBR jar prompt or anything like that. This was straight through a recommendation from someone I trust. This absolutely brought me out of my reading slump. I finished this in 24 hours. I could not put it down. I was completely hooked. I was obsessed. So this book is really cool because the entire book is written in letter and email format. There's no actual dialogue. Whatever is happening in the story, you can only find out what actually happens if it's written in one of the letters or emails. And I found that to be super fascinating. It kind of felt like you were putting the puzzle pieces together of all these people's lives, but it didn't feel invasive in any way. It kind of just felt very personal, and you felt very connected to certain characters. So in this book, we're following Sybil, who is in her 70s, and her favorite way of communicating with people is through letters. So that's basically how we learn about her life and her friends and whoever she's trying to interact with through these letters. She talks to her best friend, to her brother, to her children. She also writes letters to people who she doesn't personally know, like some of her favorite authors. So even though this is written through letters, you're able to discover so much about Sybil's life and also about the lives of the other people mentioned in this story. It is so good, and I thought the concept of writing only in letters and emails was very unique. I've never read anything like this. I felt so connected to Sybil. I really got attached to her. She was the sweetest, but also like the funniest woman. I just love how older people don't care. They will say whatever they want and they have no shame. And I love it because it's just, they're so honest. They'll tell you like it is. And that's exactly how Sybil acted in this book. It's not a big book by any means, but so much happens in it. And you also go over the span of, I think like a decade almost. I think it might be like 9 years. So you meet Sybil in like her early 70s, and then I think you get to know her until her early 80s, I believe. I would have loved to know Sybil in real life, if I'm gonna be honest. I was obsessed with her. So this definitely got me out of my reading slump. I absolutely recommend this book. Even though this was only my third book of 2026, I already know that this is gonna be one of my favorite books of the year, and probably even on my all-star list because this book was so good. The next book I picked up was A Long Winter by Colm Tóibín. This is a novella, and I picked this one up because I actually went shopping for my birthday. My birthday's at the end of January, and I went on a book shopping spree, gave myself no limits, and just kind of explored Barnes & Noble and picked up whatever felt enticing to me. And I went shopping the day before we got a huge snowstorm here. So I saw this one, read the synopsis, and I thought it would be the perfect novella to read during the snowstorm. So that's exactly what I did. So again, this one didn't have a TBR jar prompt. This one was kind of picked up because of the setting that I was in. So in A Long Winter, we follow the story of Mikkel, who just comes back from his military service. He has a brother named Jordy who is kind of heading out for his military service, so they're kind of swapping places at home. Mikkel lives with his parents, and while he's kind of adjusting back to home life, he notices that something's a little bit off with his mother, something that he's never noticed before. And his father does something that triggers his mother to the point where she decides to get up and just leave. And so she heads over to her brother's house, which is about a 4-hour walk away. Timing was very poor because she decides to leave and a blizzard hits. So as soon as the blizzard hits, Mikkel and his father are trying to go out there, kind of following the path of where she would have walked to see if they can find her, but the blizzard is just coming down so hard that they can't actually find her. They don't know if she's even at her brother's already. They don't know if she's still on the path, if she's kind of been like hidden under the snow. So they have to basically wait until the snow melts to see if she survived or not. And even though this is a novella, so much goes down in this book. I truly don't understand how he was able to do that in such a short amount of pages. He is one of my favorite authors. He wrote Brooklyn and Long Island, which are some of my favorite books. So I was not surprised that I really enjoyed this book. It was a super quick read. I read it in a couple of hours, and because of the setting that I was in, it felt like I was in a blizzard. It kind of just made sense to read. So I'm happy that I got to read it during that time. So the next book I read was Lights Out, and this is a very different book for me because I don't read dark romance. This is actually my first dark romance that I read, and the prompt that I got for this one was a book with blue on the cover, and it fit that prompt perfectly. So this is going to be a hard one to explain because not much is said on the back, but essentially we follow two characters, Allie, who is a trauma nurse, and Josh, who works in IT, aka he's a hacker. Allie has like a thing for following masked men online, and Josh happens to be one of those guys that posts those thirst traps. So they end up connecting somehow. I'm not going to really get into the details of it because I do think that is a big point of the story. We basically follow the story of them getting together, them fantasizing about this mask play. It was very interesting. Like I said, this was my first dark romance. I did not know what I was getting into, but what I will say is that somehow this was less cringy than some of the most popular romances that everyone loves. So for example, a lot of people love Done and Dusted and Lila Sage's entire series for that. I read Done and Dusted and absolutely hated it. I thought it was so cringy that I could barely get through the pages, but this for some reason didn't feel as cringy. And maybe it's because I was so shocked at what was happening, but I was able to kind of get through it a little bit better. It was more so of like learning about things that I never knew were a thing. So this was definitely an interesting read. For me, romances are not books that really stick with me, I'll say. It's not something that I'll really remember or like think about for the rest of my life, but I will say I'm glad I finally dabbled into this genre, and it was definitely an interesting read. I know this is a part of a series. I don't know if I'm going to continue it, but I'm open to it. Then I read The Names, which was our January book club pick. For our book club, we're actually doing it where we're picking a book for book club in our birthday month, and then the rest of the months of the year, we'll kind of like pick out of a jar and see the winning pick of the month. So I got to pick January's pick since my birthday's in January, and I went with The Names. This book has been on my shelf for quite some time, and I've been dying to read it. Since I knew what the concept of the book was, I thought it would be a great pick for book club because I feel like there's a lot to discuss. So this book essentially goes over the concept of what would your life be like if you had a different name. So we follow Cora, who just had a baby boy, and her husband Gordon is very big on passing down his name. So he wants the baby to be named Gordon. However, because of the relationship they have and the type of man he is, she's really questioning whether or not she wants to name her son Gordon because she doesn't want her son to follow in his footsteps. So we follow the story of three names that could be chosen for this baby boy. First one is obviously Gordon, and pleasing her husband with choosing that name. The second name is Bear, which her young daughter chooses. And the third name is Julian, which also has a special meaning. So you get to learn about why those two names were picked, and we obviously know why Gordon is picked. But basically the way the book is formatted is once the names are picked, we go through how this boy grows up by having that name, and it's in 7-year increments, which I really liked because it gave you enough time throughout his life where things could happen, but it also brought you back to key points in his life where there would be something to talk about. This book was so fascinating. I love the concept of thinking about what life could be like if you had a different name, because I do really think a name makes a person. So I really love the concept of this book. I loved how vastly different this boy's life turned out to be depending on his name, and it just shows the impact that the name can have on a person. So I really liked that. This is going to be up there with The Correspondent for me. Definitely one of my favorites for the year, I can already tell. So this is a no-brainer too. This was 5 stars. The last book I read in January was Wild Dark Shore, and the prompt that I got for this one was a book under 300 pages. And this one just fit that prompt because it's 298 pages, which was perfect because I've been dying to read this one as well. So I'm glad I got to finally read it. I've never read anything like this book before, so it was very, very interesting. Essentially in this book, we follow the story of Dominic and his 3 children who live on an island called Shearwater, which is just off the coast of Antarctica. They are literally the only people that live there, and it's also home to the world's largest seed bank. This is something I didn't even know existed, and I still have to do research on that because I didn't even know seed banks were a thing. So anyway, they're the only people that live on the island, and one day a woman washes ashore and they don't know who she is. She's on the brink of death essentially, so they bring her in and basically bring her back to life, and the entire time it's happening they're trying to figure out who is she, why is she here, and where did she come from. And then from her side, we're trying to figure out why is she here, Is she gonna trust these people? What are her intentions? It's kind of like a mystery. Is it considered a mystery? I wonder. It felt like a mystery to me, and it was very fast paced. You just wanted to know what was going on and kind of to solve why she was there. There were parts of this book that were just like, my heart would start racing because I'm just like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? The first half of this book definitely felt a tiny bit slow, just because once you get to the second half of the book, I feel like that's when the action starts to happen. But the first part of the book is a lot about learning about each of the characters. So it kind of built it up to the point where I got connected to a lot of the characters, where by the end of the book, when certain things happened, I was just like, oh my God. No, it was so good. I loved this. And again, such a unique concept that I don't know how she thought of this, but it was an amazing read. So those are the 7 books that I read in January. Even though I started off slow and I was nervous it wasn't going to be a good month, it actually turned out being a great reading month for me. And I'm very happy with the books that I got through in January. I'm very hopeful that February will look really good too. So I'm very excited to start reading those books. If you want more live updates of the books that I pull through the TBR jar prompts, and then also my live reviews as I read them, definitely follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and you will also be seeing them on Shorts since I'm pulling them over here as well, just to make it easier for everyone. But yeah, I'm super excited to start fresh in February, and I will see you guys at the end of the month to discuss my February recap.